This is Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance in West Los Angeles. Today we are joined by Bill Brand. He is a councilman in Redondo Beach. Lots of land use issues before your city. I want to talk about them generally because I think they're instructive for a resident of any city, regardless of whether one lives in Redondo Beach. For those of us that are familiar with your kind of seascape, there's a large power plant in Redondo Beach. It's owned by a company called AES. Tell us about this waterfront power plant and its future.
Okay, it's a very old power plant.
Right.
It's near retirement. We've been fighting for many years to get it permanently retired.
Right.
There's been a lot of battles for the last 15 years, in fact. That's how I got involved.
Right.
And over the last few years, there's been several initiatives, one by the residents, one by the power company themselves. They both narrowly failed. And so now...
But let's talk about those initiatives because it's very interesting. There's a measure that passed many years ago known as Measure DD,
Right.
which requires your voters to vote on development.
large upzonings. Strictly
Large
upzonings.
upzoning.
Yeah.
So, like you said, there was two measures. There was Measure A and Measure B, both presented to the voters that would have upzoned the waterfront property because we know that the power plant's going to be decommissioned. That appears to be a foregone conclusion. Both failed.
Yes.
So no upzoning at this stage
Yeah.
for the waterfront power plant property.
So where we are, Measure B, which was the latest measure, was put forth by the power company, AES. And it called for 650 homes, about 100,000 square feet of commercial development, another hotel, some other things, in a very small area for a park. And I actually thought it was going to pass.
Really?
And I was rather surprised that it didn't. And it passed by a larger margin, or I'm sorry,
failed.
it failed by a larger margin than even the previous measure.
Measure A would have allowed some upzoning,
Measure
but not as
A
much.
was 40% commercial and 60% open space with no residential.
Seems like a decent compromise, no?
Yeah, it should have passed. I wish it would have passed, but AES threatened to sue the city.
If it passed.
If it passed. They said that, you know, the reliability of electrical grid was going to be at risk, so people thought their lights might go out and that their taxes would go up. And it was complicated. People didn't quite understand it. And they were afraid of the reliability of the grid. So it failed. A year later, AES rolled out Measure B with no power plant in it. And so a lot of people were rather angry because they had voted against Measure A because they thought the power plant was necessary. Anyway, B, so, you know.
B's gone.
It was floated by AES, and it was absolutely a good way to go to get rid of the power plant. But many people, in fact, most people who voted figured out that it wasn't likely there was going to be a power plant there anyway, so we didn't need to vote for their big development plan, so it failed. And
So now what?
So once it failed, the city said, okay, let's get together, get the community together, form a task force, and develop a new vision and a new zoning for the site, and have the community build the zoning instead of AES or a smaller community group, and get the support going into the election so that, you know, it wasn't a plan brought to them, but a plan that they had developed. And in response, AES initially went back to applying for a new power plant. But they saw the handwriting on the wall, and they're not going to get a contract really from Southern California Edison or the PUC. So they said, time out, we'll go market the power plant for non-industrial uses if you guys will not form your task force. And that's ultimately what was agreed upon. So that was I'm going to say that was last January maybe. Could have the dates wrong, but yeah, so they went the first round of bidding where the developers came in. I met with many of the developers.
And what were the developers proposing?
Well, they were trying to figure out what to propose because right now you've got a very large commercial project going catty corner called Centercal.
We'll talk about that in a second.
And so they looked across the street and saw that commercial going up, and they kind of threw up their hands and said, well, it looks like you need residential over here, and that's what would be viable. But clearly the residents have been opposed to more residential. Redondo Beach is a very densely populated area already. So we're in a bit of a bind, and the cleanup costs and remediation were a big variable and wild card. So the bidding ended, and AES assessed all the bids, and they weren't happy with them. So they're going out for another round of bidding, which is going on right now. They've narrowed the field, and they're trying to, you know, hone in on...
What about a conservancy?
Well, there's a South Bay Parkland Conservancy, and they've been active since 2004, off and on, sometimes more active than not. But they're a bona fide 501c3, and they've been looking to get as much open space there as possible for, the
But
last
do they have
12
the
years.
financial wherewithal to make some bids?
No. This is going to be, well, I don't want to give a price, but it's good. It's
tens
50
of-
acres on the waterfront of Southern California.
Tens of millions, millions of dollars.
Right, in the $100 to $200 million range.
It's huge.
Right.
It's a huge
and
number.
so that's where, and what drives it is the zoning.
But as I understand it, there's a desire for park or park space. But who would buy it to build a park there?
Well, many of these projects, they're public-private partnerships, right? 3 Ps you hear often. So that's to be determined. A developer prices it. He knows that if he's going to get the public to vote for it and actually be able to get the zoning for a project, he's going to have a significant park in there. So that's the discussion with the developer: how big the park, what uses will be acceptable to the residents. What's the fiscal impacts of whatever uses there are. I'm looking to see a positive net revenue, obviously, for the city going forward.
Right.
And how much traffic is it going to generate?
So at the same time, you mentioned this CenterCal project, which plays into the whole land use questions. It's catty corner to the waterfront property. Measure DD requires a vote to develop it. The voters passed Measure G in 2010,
Exactly.
allowing for more, I'll call it aggressive development. There's some buyer's remorse on this possibly. We may see another measure to amend that Measure G to have less aggressive development on CenterCal. I'm exhausted.
I don't know if anybody's kept up with that, but let me start with Measure G. And the city brought forth this zoning of Measure G in 2010. And it allowed for a lot more development on the waterfront of Redondo Beach. I was the councilman at the time. It actually required a lawsuit to get it on the ballot, but it got on the ballot. I opposed it because I thought the zoning was way too liberal. I basically said that this was a blank check for whatever they could fit down there. And I was worried about what was going to come forward. And here we are 6 years later with a project that I think people really didn't connect the dots from the zoning they were agreeing to 6 years ago. I mean, they said things like save the Seaside Lagoon, limit development, get a park on the AES site. That was a ballot language that the voters saw.
And you believe that was a bit deceptive?
Yeah, I do. I don't think it was an accurate portrayal of what they were voting on. But nonetheless, that was 6 years ago. They voted on it. And now that the project's before them, you see a lot of controversy in the community, and some residents have formed a group called Rescue Our Waterfront, which are out collecting signatures right now for an initiative to amend the Measure G zoning so that you get a more balanced zoning, which results in a more balanced development.
Should these
that
be
doesn't,
unified, though?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great, Everyone goes there, Brad. Everyone goes there. Whether it's a newspaper editor, Paul Sylvan, the beach reporter, you've seen these editorials come out and say, why is Redondo Beach engaging in this really piecemeal overdevelopment on each site? Why don't we do a comprehensive plan, do a rezoning with the community, spread out the impacts,
So
put
why
the
don't
open
you?
space and recreational uses down by the water? Well, I would argue that our mayor, Mayor Aspel, and many in the Chamber of Commerce and many, the majority on the council, support this level of development. Not everybody's going to always agree on everything, but the problem in Redondo has been the way this has been handled, where you've had developers bringing projects and trying to sell them.
You'll come back?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot
His
going on.
name is Bill Brandt. He is a councilman in beautiful Redondo Beach. My name is Brad Pomerance on the west side of Los Angeles on Local Edition.